Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival and to the Q&A recording for Petite Maman by Céline Sciamma, screening as part of our special presentation section. My name is Andrea Picard, and I'm a senior programmer at Tiff, and it's my great pleasure to be here today with the film's writer-director, Céline Sciamma. Bienvenue, Céline.
Merci. Hello.
It's great to see you. Unfortunately, you can't be with us this year, but next time for sure. I want to begin with this beautiful, moving film. Congratulations on its success so far. I think when the film was first announced, so many people were surprised and didn't know you were working on this film, which is on a totally different scale than Portrait of a Woman on Fire. So can you tell me a bit about where the film came from and also shooting during the pandemic?
Well, it's an idea that I had in mind for several years. It's actually the first time that I had the next film while doing one film. And it came up to me, the idea popped up in my mind really as like in a dream, actually. It was just the idea of a scene. It was two little girls building a tree house like that. Mm-hmm. And they were the same age, and I was like, oh, obviously one is the mother and one is the daughter, which felt very, very true and very, very weird. Think about that, very troubling idea. Yeah. And I kept that idea in my mind as a troubling and also as a very warm idea, as an idea for the future. As I was going through the struggle of a very long and complex writing for Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I was thinking, oh, then I will do this. But I didn't expect that it would be so fast, so quick after the Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And because the pandemic happened, and suddenly this film that felt somehow intemporal and very personal became, in a way, because it was dealing with grief, it was dealing with losing our elders and not being able to say goodbye, it was dealing with a lot of things that we were actually all dealing with in our life, and it felt urgent. It felt like a collective urgent story. And I rushed in and decided that, as cinemas were closed in France, and I wrote the film after the first lockdown, and I shot the film during the second lockdown, and we were able to work. We were given the right to work, and we were given the right to do cinema, not any work, which is looking at people's face. And so suddenly, shooting during the pandemic was, well, crossing an empty city, Paris, which is one of the cities with the highest density in the world, and just go into a box because the film was shot in a studio in the suburbs of Paris. And then in this box, we would have created this whole world. And then a kid would take off her mask and we would just watch her eat cereals, and it felt really sacred and really important to do cinema and to celebrate cinema, but also just to tell this very special story.
And where were the natural scenes shot?
The natural scenes were shot in my hometown, where I grew up. It's called Cergy. It's a new town, 30 kilometers from Paris. And it's a city that is, I grew up in this city, and it was basically built when I was born. I grew up in a new town, what we call a new town. Mm-hmm. So, it's a city that's just a few years older than me, and I shot Water Lilies there. Tomboy was not shot there, but was written with my childhood and this town in mind, which is it's a very modern town but built in nature. And I wrote the script thinking about this, my childhood memories. Basically, when building this tree house, where I used to build crappy tree house by myself. I built it with a whole crew. Felt like revenge in a way.
Right. The landscapes are really beautiful. You're lucky to have grown up there. As you mentioned, the story is quite timely in a way and poignant. I remember when I saw the beginning in the nursing home, that takes on a whole different resonance during the pandemic as so many people perished there. Was that on your mind?
Well, that's exactly the kind of magic that happened with the film, and that made me, go very fast. It's because I wrote that scene before everything happened. I locked myself down. I locked myself up a week before lockdown to write, and I wrote the first 10 scenes of the film because that's how I usually go. I try to write chronologically, and then to go back to Paris and lock myself down and decided that this wouldn't be any writing residence, so I just stopped everything. And I'd written that first scene as I write chronologically, and that first scene was very personal to me. It was about, I was thinking about my own grandmother passing away and how it felt for her to me to visit in a nursing home, not as a child, but
Right.
And that's when I opened the script 2 months after I had written this scene and going through things that made me kind of forget what it was. I read it and suddenly it wasn't personal anymore. It was still personal, but it was loaded. With a collective background, and as the film was portraying a child character, it felt even more. Yeah, it felt the urge to tell a story that would treat a kid and an adult the same in the cinema, to give this very democratic, cathartic fictional experience that would respect both the adult and the kids, and that I wanted to take part in the reopening of cinemas. And the film has been out in France, 2 weeks after the cinemas were reopened, even though the rooms couldn't be full and everything. It felt like this. It felt part of the idea of making the film, of putting it in the rooms and internationally also as soon as we could.
Great, and the film is traveling a lot internationally, as you mentioned, which is really great. You seem to have a real affinity with childhood. I mean, you've made films on adolescence with Water Lilies, Bande de Filles, and then Tomboy a little bit younger, and here childhood again. Can you talk about what draws you to that phase of life?
Well, I have a whole different answer to that question now, because previously I used to think, so I used to answer that had the privilege of doing films very young. I was 26 when I did Water Lilies, then Tomboy, and it was okay. I'm talking about what my experience of life, which is youth so far, even though it wasn't maybe a very young youth, but and now. And I was thinking, it's something you should do when you're young, because it requires a lot of energy, a lot of faith, and then you will. And then I did Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I worked for the first time with actual professional actresses, and actually didn't see the difference. Felt I was doing the same job, and wanted to go back with kids, even though I felt, oh no, this is too exhausting, and why? What would there be to tell? And suddenly I was like, no, I'm not interested in kids' character or kids' universe. It's just that I find them incredibly good character for cinema, because and the kind of cinema that I'm doing, because they care so much. They want to see and understand, and they're very, very intense character. And regarding love, wanting to know your sibling, wanting to know who your parents are, it's in all genres of cinema can go through a kid's gaze or a teen gaze. And I remember that there's no secret, because life definitely felt the same. It's very intense, a life that is full of desire, and that's what I kind of always want. I'm trying to do character that are desire-driven, desire-written, and kids are really, really, the depth of the way they care felt is for me is a very good. Narrative and tension and dynamic, and it's a very good heart for cinema.
Let's talk about the casting. The Gans sisters are amazing. Where did you find them?
Well, I found them. They came to me because we put an ad, on social media, and that's also the difference. It's my fifth film, and I've been working with kids, and so suddenly you attract kids that are attracted to the kind of film you do. So if you're if you're happy to let go and not, try to find the perfect, I don't know what that means, kids, going through dozens of them. I've the luck to be chosen, which is a big part of casting. And I wanted to, the castia had a twist, had an idea. It's that I wanted to work with siblings, not specifically with siblings who would have been born the same day, because that's how the Sanz sisters define themselves. But I wanted siblings. I wanted to embody one of the hypotheses of the film, which is because the film is being playful with genealogy and saying, well, if I meet my mother as a kid, maybe she's my sister, maybe we share the same mother. And I wanted the casting to be already troubling. And the fact that they were born the same day and that they both wanted to be there also was working on another level, which is abolish some form of hierarchy, even, between siblings, and not for them, but basically for the viewer, so that the viewer would be fully on board with the fact that they meet exactly at the same time and that they are exactly, exactly the same age. So it's this equality between characters that we're looking for. That's the experience that we're giving, equality between the mother and the daughter. Through cinema, suddenly they would give us that faith. And so that's when, casting is always not about finding the right person. It's always about ideas. And suddenly this idea was kind of the sci-fi of the film. And it's a film about presence. It's a film about, at some point when I was dreaming about this little scene that popped up into my mind, I was like, oh, maybe this should be an anime. Maybe this should really be an animated film. And I had, even though I decided it would be live action because it would be about the presence, I always had Miyazaki in mind more than any other filmmakers. So this stuck with me. But it's always beautiful to work with kids because you see them learning the job in the course of a very, very short amount of time because they are in danger. It's not that they can't learn, they can take the time they want to learn. They're in danger, they are being watched. And that's one of the things that I find, we all, when you work with kids, also you find it's a great mirror of also what it is to be a director because, actors, they are being watched doing their jobs. You gotta say that, but directors also. Director is doing his or her job, basically being watched doing his or her job. And, that's, we could talk a lot about that. But I felt connected to, it's beautiful to see them learn and to see them understanding and loving cinema. And that's how we work together. I never talk to actors about how they feel, what the film means. It's always about this is like a spy film, or this is like a love film, or it's always about cinema.
I had heard you mention Miyazaki when speaking about this film before, but I also thought about Chantal Akerman in parts, and there's this incredible tension where this is kind of the first time where you're using a fairy tale or magic realism, but it's so rigorous and precise at the same time. And when I think about Chantal's work, everybody talks about the static shots, nothing happens, but she's always so playful, right? The Chaplin-esque physicality that nobody talks about. So I really thought about that tension that you create in this film.
I'm glad you said that because I always think about Chantal Akerman. And it's always in more and more because as I grow old also, and I notice more and more the humor you're talking about, because she's such an authority, and when you discover works when you're young, it's also very impressive, and she's not told well, she's usually told in a very cold way, and it's such I mean I love so much when I watch the film, and it's true that I thought about her also because I thought about two things. I thought about her and her mother and the film she made with her mother, and also I thought, what would she have thought of that film? Which is what I will think for the rest of my life as a filmmaker, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember I did a retrospective in 2019, and when you came for Portrait of Lady on Fire, you very kindly did a video interview. So thank you for that, belatedly.
Thank you for
I wanted to ask about your working relationship with Tiff, who I think is an extraordinary cinematographer. So this is the second time you work with
her, huh? It's happening.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
But I can't wait. Have you seen it?
No, soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you?
I lost you.
I lost you. We're back. Are you back?
Oh, we're back. Okay.
We're back.
So I didn't hear your question.
Just working with Claire Maton.
Well, working with Claire Maton is now working. I don't know. It feels like it's a relationship that really added a lot to the joy of making films, I must say. And yes, it's one of the most important rencontres that I've done in my career, for sure, in my work, because I feel like I met somebody who's as obsessed as I am with the film we're doing. And when I mean obsessed, it's because it's how she thinks about the film as a whole and how we build this drama together. For instance, I do the costumes for my own film, for instance, and how she's committed to the dialogue around colors and material, and how sometimes we start to talk about this is how color grading in the film is going to start, and how she's part of everything. That's the absolute ideal collaborator, because and also how incredibly fun she is, because that should be told. We have fun.
I have many friends who have worked with her. I'd like to meet her one day, for sure. We only have time for one more question. I don't really know how to articulate this, but it's more of a feeling. The film is so incredibly moving, but it's never sentimental. Are you aware of that fine line, and how do you navigate it?
Well, I try to experiment more and more on that line. It's basically, it's where I experiment, I think, and especially with this film even more, because it was with kids, and I didn't want to ask them for their emotions, because they didn't have a lot of emotions regarding what we were telling. Mm-hmm. Some of it was moving for them. Obviously, for kids, what's moving is the bond with the grandmother. It's the kind of grief or anticipation of grief that they have to deal with. But some of the things they would find very fun, for instance, was a whole other emotion for the character. Mm-hmm. So it's really I try to do cinema where you're not watching, the show is not you watching a character having emotion. It's about, but it's not for it to be cold or even prudish emotionally. It's really as an experiment for the emotions of the viewer to have a room. It's really about the dialogue, not between a character and the viewer. Identification, I think, we should discuss that. I think you identify with the film, so it means you identify with the language, you identify with ideas. It's ideas that are moving in cinema. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying it's the case always, There's several kind of range of pleasure, but the pleasure I'm trying to, and the ideas that I'm trying to play with is this kind of a sensual cinema that would take you to an experiment about your own emotion, and especially dealing with family. I really try to make a film where, you know, whatever relationship you have with your mother, whether it was good, bad, whether she's alive, whether she's alive but not there, whether you miss her because, you know, because you loved her, whatever, there's room for your interaction with the film and for your own travel through your own genealogy. And this is about, so making room for the emotions and the sensual experience of the viewer is about not, you know, stuffing the film with the emotions of your character or my personal story or emotions. And it's I feel it's an experiment going on film of film. This is really a film that is really after Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and trying to, even though it's very different, trying to give, you know, that experience that was felt so strong by some people, and, you know, some didn't felt it at all. You know, I'm always trying to make it more democratic and this time to offer it to, you know, also, it's not a family movie, but you can go and see it as a family. So that might be a good definition of a family movie for cinephiles.
Also perfectly contained with a great runtime. You know, it's like perfectly. Well, thank you so much, Céline, for your time today for this beautiful film. We're so happy to be showing it at Tiff, and I hope to see you in real life sometime soon.
Me too.
Merci.
Thank you so much, Andrea.